Fascinating DXM. Yo, what's going on? It's someone that's no one here, and welcome back to today's report. Today's report is coming from Hesychasm off the Psychonaut wiki. When this happened, 12/4/15, the drugs used were Dextromethorphan and diphenhydramine with white grapefruit juice used as a potentiator. The dose was 1,062 milligrams of DXM and 50 milligrams of DPH. The route of administration was through Robitussin. Gender, male. Weight, 68 kilograms, or 150 pounds. Age, 19. And the prior experience includes a third plateau DXM trip, salvia, and heavy doses of cannabis. So here's another high-dose DXM trip that includes some pretty unique effects compared to the others we've seen so far. I think you guys are going to like it, and without further ado, let's dive right into it. My friend and I decided to try a fourth plateau trip on DXM together. 1,062 milligrams DXM, 3 bottles of Robitussin, 50 milligrams DPH, attempt to counteract nausea, not to co-trip. 1 gallon white grapefruit juice, and a single plain bagel, each for the 20 hours before. My prior experience with psychedelics/dissociatives included only an earlier third plateau trip a few weeks before, salvia, and borderline psychedelic doses of weed, to the point of geometry. Before you say it, I know I was definitely a little too courageous. My friend had done everything you can name at least once, and at one point a few years back was using lower doses of DXM frequently, but never third/fourth plateau, and hadn't touched it since. I'll skip the uninteresting parts that you can get from any DXM trip report, like projectile vomiting syrup and the expected dissociation, and I'll get to the goods. Perhaps from lack of tolerance, my body had a very bad reaction to the stuff, and I couldn't really enjoy the trip's peak. My mind would spend some time in a hallucinatory place, usually a static image of an inexplicable object, or a color field, or nothingness, before getting ripped back to reality by heavy breathing or my heart beating too fast, or perhaps another bout of nausea. At one point, our friend stepped in, not knowing what we were up to, and he reported afterward that I seemed like I was in intense physical/mental distress. That's all nothing very unusual, pretty much what you'd expect of a bad DXM trip. However, my experience had some worthwhile moments. Later in the day, after I made it back to my place, aided by a sober friend, I was lounging around waiting for the trip to subside enough for me to get some sleep. Perhaps from the white grapefruit juice, I entered a state I can only describe as semi-sigma. All the sigma effects were there, but only to a moderate extent, and I was still cognitively lucid, i.e., aware that delusions were caused by a trip, and generally able to figure out what was real and what wasn't. I even had the notorious wacky cam, where closing my eyes would show me whatever scene I was looking at before, but with dreamlike delusional additions, all completely nonsensical. And the most fantastic effect of all, something I've never heard anyone report from a trip besides a few DXM/DPH accounts. Staring at the ceilings, the textured bumps would start to move and rearrange and swirl in patterns. But it wouldn't stop there. The swirling patterns would start to come out of the ceiling and form three-dimensional objects coming out at me, all made still out of the same textured dots. Like this, look at the screen, but without the wires between the dots. I remember a formless, beautiful fractal spiral coming out at me, a dragonfly forming from these dots and coming down at me, and a flower, all very clearly. I could reset the condensation of these objects by double-taking. It was very beautiful and helped me calm down after the incredibly unpleasant height of the trip. Even more fascinating than that was my friend's experience. We haven't had a chance to talk for too long, but he says that at the peak of the trip, his consciousness was off in some alien world with light beings who lived according to their own physics. This is actually semi-common with fourth plateau DXM dosages, if I understand correctly. He said it was hard to remember much of the experience, and much of what the beings had to say to him, but that it was very pleasant and that he felt welcomed into this strange world. Incredibly, when the aforementioned friend stepped into the room and tried to talk to my fellow tripper, he responded, "Friend's name is not here right now, but he's okay." So our unexpected visitor reports. My friend says that he did not actively perceive, see, or otherwise experience this interaction, but while he was in dissociative headspace land, he for a moment felt the presence of this friend. It is bizarre and incredibly interesting to think that some automatic subconscious process could generate a linguistic response like that while the conscious mind was otherwise occupied. It's times like this that I wish I was a neuroscientist and that all this psychonautics was happening in a controlled environment with proper neurological observation. But stranger than that was that about 4 hours in, my friend gets a text from his girlfriend about something and has to go meet her, and he does, all while I'm still more or less wreathing around, lost in some kind of cognitive time loop and feeling very sick, if feeling anything at all. He made sure I was alright with him leaving first, of course. He somehow managed to put himself together and act normal enough that people didn't realize he was on anything serious. He said this was difficult, pretty much focusing his complete attention on staying associated. I presume former experience with DXM and other drugs meant he had a pretty good grasp on how to handle himself under the influence. A few days later, he smoked some weed, normal amount, in his words, only one hit, and blacked out. His buddy says that he became completely nonsensical the whole time he was blacked out, and was constantly laughing and pretty much had to lay down. Very bizarre thing, especially for a guy who smokes a lot. Definitely related somehow to the DXM. So, yeah, rough summary is that DXM is weird and has potential to not be a fun time. You probably all knew that before, but I feel it's worth getting slightly unusual reports out there for the public conscious, harm reduction, etc. So this is definitely a report that stood out in ways. Unique effects is a good way to put it. But before we break down the report, let's establish what DXM is, for those of you who don't know. DXM, or Dextromethorphan, can be found in over-the-counter cough medicines. While it does work for that purpose, at higher doses it can actually act as a dissociative substance. Drugs like ketamine or PCP are common examples. But it isn't uncommon to hear someone overdosing on cough suppressants like Robicoff to trip. The experience itself can be a blend of recreational and spiritual effects. Also, as we can see here, a great deal of undesirable effects as well. Our buddy Hesychasm here reports a great deal of all that, I would say. We can see that just from taking that much, he isn't hiding that you have a high potential for some confusion, physical discomfort, and among a variety of other things. Now, if you don't know what he was talking about when he mentioned plateaus and sigma, let's break that down. Now, a DXM plateau is based off the dosage you take. There are 4 known plateaus, and getting to each stage varies on your body weight. We can see more of the recreational effects present near the first and second plateaus, with the third and fourth providing more spiritual and hallucinatory effects. Oh yeah, and when you're doing it through over-the-counter cough medicines, the higher plateaus typically will provide more physical discomfort, though there has been a threshold dose claimed that the bodily dissociation found on high doses can negate some of these effects. Now, we don't really cover very many fourth plateaus, and when we do, each user seems to have something unique going on. Here it doesn't seem that out of the ordinary. Now, he mentions he did have some slight DXM sigma effects. Now, if you don't know what sigma is on DXM, it's a state that you can reach by binging on multiple DXM doses between the second and third plateau. What happens is your sigma receptors pretty much get hit hard, and just to relate, PCP on its own activates the sigma receptors. Typically though at this state, you can find yourself to be in a confusing mess of bizarreness. You'd most likely would be up for a very long period of time, so you can also expect the effects of sleep deprivation alongside this, making it likely to be somewhat delusional. So we can see that Hesychasm compares his state to this, but I think the hallucinations of the 3D geometric shapes and his friend visiting aliens show just how versatile this experience can get. Now I do want to bring up a couple of trips to compare. The first one is the most recent DXM trip, which was DXM 1800 milligrams, first time trip, by Grotesquerie Concealed. In his report he mentions similar physical effects, but he separated the timing of his doses. In his report he describes massive ego loss, but remaining in full bliss. There is a moment though where he experiences geometric spider webs around the room he was in. So it is interesting to consider the potential for full-fledged geometric shapes to form on such doses. The other report I want to bring up is First Time Leaving My Body by Safe and Sound, where he took 1100 milligrams, a much more comparable dose. I think a lot of the effects described are on par with what was described here as the normal effects of DXM. Safe and Sound took the dosage at a party and ended up puking, had the shivers, had massive physical discomfort, among anxiety of the strong trip approaching. I'd suggest listening to the report if you want more on that, but we also see here that Safe and Sound had many internal hallucinatory states, even to the point where he came to hallucinate his ego into different parts. This I think shows the spiritual potential of DXM better as well. But with that, we're going to leave it there. If you guys want to see more high-dose DXM reports or any DXM reports at all, let me know and we can get into that. If you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, follow the socials. It's been your boy, Someone That's No One, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.